Hello, my name is Roberto Mendoza. My mother is Muskogee from the Oklahoma Muskogee Nation. My father is Chicano. His people are originally from Mexico in the San Luis Potosi area, the Purepeches. What I would like to talk about is a couple of things. One is this concept that's coming up from the south called buen vivir, meaning living well, and it's opposed to this concept of living better, which is what the capitalist system currently operates under. Living better means constant progress in technology, constant progress in getting more material goods, getting more of nature under our control, and creating more wealth. And but what it doesn't say is that most of this wealth comes from indigenous lands and from the global south. And as a result, there's enormous poverty and slums in the global south as a direct result of large corporations based in Europe and North America who take this wealth and bring it back to their country. But even when it comes to our countries, the European and North American countries, it ends up in the hands of mostly the tiny percentage called the 1%. And there's an enormous gap between the 1% and the rest of the people in most of these countries around the world, but even more so starting to happen here in the West, in the so-called Western civilized countries. So this concept of buen vivir is a way of looking at the world, a way of living in the world, which is very different. It's a way of living in balance. It's a way of living within your means, and it is not motivated by greed, but it's motivated by love for your neighbors, your families, and the earth, and all living things. So this concept has been around, of course, a long time. It's an ancient concept, but it's becoming part of the new trend that people are talking about around the world as an alternative to what is known now as globalization, or in other words, capitalization, or in other words, empire. And I think we need to look at that more and spread it around and talk about it and understand it ourselves and bring it out into the public, because it really is a better alternative to what we've been living under. And as far as looking at the big picture, I think we need to look at history in the way indigenous people have looked at it. Like in this continent alone, we've been here at least 30,000 years. Some people say even longer, and some people say forever. But what I'm trying to say is that the system that currently dominates the world, this capitalist globalized empire, is, as far as our historical memory goes, it's just a blip. It's just a few hundred years in thousands and thousands and thousands of years. A few generations and hundreds of thousands of generations. So it's kind of like an anomaly. Some people have compared it to like a cancer in the body politic. And I think that's kind of like an appropriate way of looking at it, because in the body, cancer cells are a part of the body, but they've kind of lost contact with the rest of the cells, and they're starting to grow without any purpose. They grow just to grow. And they even start to take blood vessels from the rest of the body to feed themselves. And eventually they're growing because it has no purpose. It crowds out and ends up destroying the whole body itself, and people die from it. So in some ways, capitalism is a similar kind of anomaly in what we call the body politic, because it grows for only one purpose, just to keep growing. Capitalism has to grow in order to keep itself alive. And its motivation is greed. And that is completely out of balance in the needs of the whole body politics. If one or if a few or a part of the body is greedy and wants to take all the resources of the body, eventually it will kill that body. And that's what capitalism will do if it continues on. It will kill the human life on this planet. It won't kill the earth itself, but it will kill all human life. And it will take a good percentage of animal and plant life with it. It's basically a cancer. It's basically driven towards creating death and destruction in its wake. And it survives by providing a few crumbs to a small percentage of people who control the means of production and who control the means of communication and who control our minds through massive advertising that this is the way you need to live. You need more. You deserve it. And the concept of buen vivir is, of course, old. It's ancient. But it's also what we need for the 21st century and beyond. And it's an idea that its time has come, and we need to talk about it not only among our own communities, but spread it around to other people, other ethnicities, especially here in the United States. Because right now we're living in a historical period of tremendous change. I'm not speaking necessarily of the Mayan prophecy, but I'm also talking about change as far as the end of the system, the way of living that we've known for the last few hundred years. That system is coming to an end. It is unsustainable. It cannot keep doing what it's doing. And people are seeing that. They're clearing the cobwebs from their eyes and the advertisers from their brains and seeing that this system is going nowhere and is taking us over a cliff, and we have to stop and find a better way. So a lot of, especially young people, are beginning to see how bad it is because it does really, they don't see a future for themselves, not just among Native people, but among young whites and blacks and other races in this country. So they're a good place to start talking about these new concepts because they're open to new ideas. We're living in a period similar to what was like in 1968 when there were revolts in Paris, in Mexico City, in Prague, and in Chicago. Around the world, there was a tremendous social change happening. And now we've come to another period where this tremendous social change is happening. It started out in places like Tunisia, in Tahrir Square in Egypt, among the indignados in Spain, and it's in the Occupy movement in the United States, which just like exploded, literally. In a few months, hundreds of occupations took place all over the United States in small towns, in my city of Tulsa, in places like Tahlequah, Stillwater, Norman, Enid, place that you would never expect a radical movement to come up. And it, of course, is led mainly by young people, mainly by young white people. But it is an opening, a political opening that we need to step into because it gives us a chance to put out new ideas. And the indigenous people have some ideas that make sense to a lot of people. That make sense to not just people in this country, but around the world. Indigenous people around the world are talking in similar terms about how we need to live within our means, to simplify our lives, to get rid of values like greed and competition and materialism and wanting material things and wealth. You know, this whole thing about globalization, which they constantly tell us all the young people around the world want, well, that's not really true. Of course, some people are caught up in the propaganda around it, but young people everywhere are questioning, where is this leading us? And they're starting to look around. They're starting to get out of their little neighborhoods and looking at going to the poor areas of town, into the slums. And then they'll notice the enormous poverty and ill health and social problems. They'll notice that the jails are crammed to the gills with people, mostly people of color. especially in the Western Hemisphere and in Europe, but more so in this country. We have the largest numbers, percentage-wise, of prisoners of any country in the world, and we have probably the largest number in just quantity, pure quantity of prisoners. And this is the product of this system. So people like Johan Galtung from Norway, Grace Boggs from the United States, Emmanuel Wallerstein from the U.S. are saying that this American empire, which is propped up by the military force, is coming to an end. It can no longer sustain itself. And we're coming into a period of chaos. And it can be really bad or it can be really good, but it really depends on what we do, each individual of us, what choices that we make to change the way we think, to look at our values, to re-examine our basic values, what is really important in our lives, what really makes sense in the best way to live. And of course, indigenous people know a lot about that because we haven't lost these values. Some of us have, of course, but there's always a core that haven't lost these values who can bring them back to the young people. And so we are in a time of great historical change, a time that can turn out to be really bad or really good, but it depends upon our individual decisions that we make about how we're going to live and how we're going to speak out. If we have this knowledge, we should speak about it. We should talk to everybody about it, even if we are shy. And I have been a shy person myself because I'm a product of boarding schools. I'm a product of racism. When I tried to speak out as a little kid, I was laughed at, put down. So I've had to struggle my whole life to be able to speak out to what I see is the truth. And it's taken me a long time, but it's better late than never. And I urge all of you, even if you're older yourself, to start looking at change. What's good about what you do and what's bad? And what will make sense? And what is the best way for everyone, not just for yourself or your family or even your own nation? So this is what I would like to encourage you to do. Get involved, because this is a time of great extreme historical change, and whatever you do always makes a bigger difference in a time like this. So let's get going. Thank you.